Today, I'll teach you the system you can use to ace your next exam, inspired by Newport's book, How to Be a Straight A Student. Hi, I'm Michael. I'm a student at Brown University coming to you from a brand new desk setup. Make sure you stay until the end to learn the best order to complete your exam questions in. Before we can get into the system, we have to stop and ask ourselves a few questions. In other words, take a self-evaluation. Step 0. In other words, we need to evaluate, is your course load insane? So take out your schedule, take a quick glance at it, and if you are taking more than the normal amount of classes for students at your school, ask yourself, are you really able to handle it? Because I would never recommend taking more than the normal amount of classes. With extracurriculars and social activities, 90% of the time it is not worth it to take that extra class and stress yourself out for that semester. No one cares if you're taking more than the average amount of classes or credits, so don't overload your schedule with all those extra classes and activities. Hopefully the course load isn't too terrifying, but I like to take a look at each class and see the dedicated amount of hours that I need to take for that class. If there were certain classes I would have to take as a general requirement, I would ask myself, do I have to take classes with these certain professors or at these certain times? And how difficult are these classes based on their reputation? Every school has some sort of website or system to rate classes, whether it be Rate My Professor or an institution's own system. So if the class I was taking is notoriously difficult and there's no way to take an alternative or get out of it, I'd also see if I could take the class as a pass-fail instead of for a letter grade. And if I do have to take the class, I would just make sure to not take too many difficult classes at once and mix up the different subjects that I was taking. It is setting yourself up for failure if you're taking too many difficult classes or too many classes in general. We have to make sure our course load is normal, and then we can go on to learning the methods of studying effectively. I'm so glad we had that heart-to-heart. But now we can go into the actual system you can use to study effectively for your exams. Step 1 is to take smart notes. Always go to class and take the best notes possible. Toward the end of last semester, I would miss a lecture or two for some of my courses, and then I would have to watch back those courses to make sure I was prepared for the final. I literally procrastinated so much with those. It's so much more work to watch the lecture after than to just go to lecture. When I watch the lecture recording, even though I try to watch it at 2 times speed, I try to take notes as well, and then if I don't hear something correctly or I miss it, I would go back to the video and I would then take notes on it, and then theoretically, even though that would make me have better notes, it's just a waste of my time because I'm putting more stress on myself to go and take those notes and do an extra assignment for a class, which could just have been something that was done as part of my routine or habit. With the 80-minute lectures, it is insane. Trying to watch an 80-minute lecture online is not fun. I find it so much easier to just go in person to lecture and then take notes in real time. Even if you miss a few words, it's better than having to go back, watch the video as an extra homework assignment, and then trying to catch up with the work later. Then in class, I like to put question marks or red highlights next to any of the notes I don't understand. And then I like to ask the professor during or after lecture any questions that I had during the class. And speaking of asking questions, please ask questions. I was sitting next to my friend in organic chemistry and I had no idea how the professor got to a certain part. And I asked her, how do we get to here? And she told me, I have no idea. So I became confident enough to ask the question during class. It helped clarify something for me and for probably other students in the class as well. Asking questions during lecture means that I understand more material as we're going through it, but it also makes sure that I have less questions to ask the professor after lecture, and it just saves more time for myself. Also, if you're interested in general college advice, be sure to check out my video on the truth about college success, linked above. For actually taking notes, there are 2 types of notes I like to take for 2 different types of classes. So there are technical classes and non-technical classes. Technical classes are STEM classes, economics classes, classes that mostly focus on doing some sort of problem or solving out some sort of equation. Non-technical courses usually are more written and more verbose, such as English, history, arts courses, etc. And those classes have another writing style as well. So for those non-technical courses, I like to write notes in a question, evidence, conclusion format. So the question will be the main question the professor or the current slide of the presentation is positing. The evidence will be any evidence to support the question and the answer to the question, and the conclusion is what the final answer to that question is. So if you're lucky enough to have slides in a non-technical course, then you can usually follow the slides and use those to help structure the questions you're answering with the conclusions you're answering, and then put some evidence in between. If the professor is simply talking the whole time without some sort of presentation, then I simply listen to find out when they're going to a new point, and then I make that a new question and a new conclusion. And sometimes I have a conclusion before I have a question. I sort of fill in as I go along. For technical courses, such as STEM courses or economics courses, I like to write down as many sample problems as possible, and when I find a new type of problem is explained during lecture or on an assignment, I make sure to write in detail the explanation for the steps of the problem, especially when I'm first starting out, to make sure I understand everything and that when I go back to it, I can fully understand each step of that type of problem. So now that the basics of taking notes are gone through, we go to step 2, which is to demote your assignments. I think it's ideal to work a little bit each day on an assignment to avoid the day before syndrome, or working the day before an assignment is due. I've been there so many times where I'm working on an assignment the night before it's due, but it's so unfavorable to be in that position, so I try my best to work a little bit on long-term projects. Even just planning out a project on Google Calendar makes it so much easier for me to start the project and get it done in a more timely manner than staying up so late to get something done the night before it's due. Now, for readings. For readings for technical courses, it truly depends on the course. For some classes I took, the professor would literally say that the textbook is more of a reference. And for other classes, they would say, please read the textbook before you go to lecture. It really depends on the course and what the course is testing you on. If the course is really heavily relying on the textbook, then I'd like to read the textbook. But if the course is based more on problem solving, then reading the textbook isn't going to be of that much use. I find it more efficient to bring the textbook to class in some cases and look at the textbook and follow along for some vocabulary, for example, if I don't understand what's going on during class. But for some classes, I find it better to pre-read or just look at the vocabulary. So it really is not an easy answer, and I can't say, don't do the readings for this class, do the readings for that class. You just have to figure it out for yourself for each course that you're taking. Now, for non-technical courses, readings are more complicated because readings are usually more integral for those courses. Oh, some of the syllabuses that you read, the readings would literally take you 40 hours per week to do effectively if you were to actually read through every single thing. Especially for some courses, they would have you read full textbook chapters that I simply do not have the time to do. I find it important to do the readings in those non-technical courses usually. So I like to rank the readings in 3 different tiers, from most important to least important. The most important are the readings that make an argument. The second most important are the readings that describe an event or person. And the least important readings are the readings that are provided for context. So I go in that order for the readings, and when I do the readings, depending on how long the readings are, sometimes I don't have the time to go through all of them, so I simply skim down the readings. And I highlight some important parts that I see when I quickly read through them, and then I make sure to have those notes ready for class. And when I do take notes on the readings, I also write them in a question, evidence, conclusion format. If the readings are also particularly dense and I'm running short on time, reading the introduction and conclusion sections of readings generally gives you an effective sense of what's going on. And also the professor usually goes over the most salient points of the readings during lecture. Also, technical courses love to assign problem sets, and with problem sets, I usually like to go to teaching assistant office hours because they can usually guide me in the right direction, but also I like to work on problem sets in groups. And if I'm particularly stumped on a problem, I just like to go and walk outside. Sometimes I just figure out a method to solve it as I go walk around. But just asking for help is one of the best ways to make sure that I get those problem sets done. Also, when I do write problem sets with a group, for example, I write them up formally the first time because I find that when I write them in Chicken Scratch, I just have to rewrite them later before I submit them, and it's just too much of a hassle. So we've gone over notes, we've gone over the different assignments, but now the exam is coming up, and that leads us to step 3, marshaling your resources. I like to figure out exactly what the test will cover because I want to know what I'm studying for and what to anticipate. I ask the lecturer, if they don't explain it in class already, what the exam format will be, how long the exam will be, where it will be, and then I like to ask if there are any other previous exams we can go off of to study for the upcoming exam. Now, after that's completed, the next step depends on whether the course is technical or non-technical. For non-technical courses, I cluster all of the notes that I wrote down, the question, evidence, conclusion notes specifically from the readings and the lectures. For technical courses, I build mega problem sets. In other words, I take all the problems that were taught during the course and I compile them into one large master document. Now, for some courses, of course, there are so many problems to go through that I can't go through all of them before the upcoming midterm exam or final. So I prioritize certain types of problems, more difficult problems that I would have to do again. Time-consuming problems that are basic, are not worth my time at that point, I just go start with the problems that require more analysis, more in-depth reasoning than the ones that are simply going to make me waste my time. So with the study guide ready, step 4 is to conquer the material. And one of the best ways that I find to study is to use a quiz and recall method. In other words, with the non-technical courses, the reason that I write them down in a question, evidence, conclusion format is because I can quiz myself on the questions that are being asked in that question, evidence, conclusion format note style. So if I wrote a question such as how did Napoleon rise to power, I can make a flashcard, or I can simply fold the paper in half at that point and explain to myself or write down the evidence and the conclusion that I reached from that question. And then I look up at all the evidence and conclusions I wrote when I originally took my notes to see what I missed, and then I make sure that I fully understand everything that I missed, and I keep going until I have a really good understanding of how to answer that question fully. With some classes, flashcards are necessary for simply rote memorization. Different websites such as Quizlet are fine for that. Also, I find it so important to spread out memorization over several days, and that includes the quiz and recall method, because my brain can only handle so much. I will not subject myself to trying to study 6 hours the night before an exam. It has happened before, but I do not enjoy it. Studying 600 flashcards the day before an exam is not fun and it's not effective. So I really try now to study in advance every single day for hopefully an hour. If I give myself 2 weeks before the exam is coming up and then I study an hour a day and I increase that as the exam gets particularly close, I think that'll be fine for any sort of case for memorizing anything or quizzing myself on anything. Step 5 is really simple, and that's after you've done all of that work or as you're getting closer to the exam date, it's important to invest in academic disaster insurance. And as complicated as it sounds, it's simply making sure that any of the question marks you put down in your notes are answered and that you understand them. Eliminating the question marks I took down for notes is so necessary in making sure that I don't walk into an exam and I'm completely confused by some sort of topic that I thought would never show up on the exam. So we've studied effectively, and now it's the date of the exam. And that leads us to step 6, which is to give A+ answers. And what I like to do when I get the exam is to look over the whole test first. Because when I have that whole exam in front of me and I look at everything and I'm prepared, it motivates me and it gives me confidence to complete the exam effectively. After looking at the whole exam, I like to figure out how much time I need to spend on each question, and then I like to leave a 10-minute break at the end to check over anything. That makes sure that I have the necessary speed to effectively finish the exam and give myself time to check over anything and hand in the exam with confidence that I did everything that I could to get the highest grade possible. So if you stuck around this long, you've probably wondered about the best order to complete your exam questions in. And the best order, in my opinion, is to go from the questions that are easiest for you to the questions that are hardest for you. Most of the time, especially for technical courses, the questions are all worth the same point value. So then going through those questions in the order that you find easiest motivates you to get the most simple stuff for you done first, and then makes those harder points that you have to get at the end something that you can spend maybe a little more time on, put some more effort in, but then you're going to know that you put all the effort you could into those simpler problems and get the most points you could out of them. For non-technical courses, there also may be an essay or short answer question. And for those, I like to spend 5 to 10 minutes writing some sort of simple outline so that I understand where I'm going with a certain answer to the essay question. Providing some simple bullets about evidence that I can brainstorm, not writing out a whole outline, but simply having 5 to 10 minutes to write my thesis and how I'm going to approach the question is so helpful in terms of just answering that question effectively. And then if I have any leftover time, which I usually don't, I like to check over my work. I tend to be very careful my first round of an exam. If you tend to go faster with an exam, then take time to go over each exam. I always stay till the end of each exam. I don't understand leaving an exam early because I like to put all of the effort I can into getting the best grade I can on the exam. If I could stay 5 more minutes, I don't see a reason to leave an exam early to go relax or do something. I'm not in such a rush that I have to go to another event right after an exam. So I get so confused when other students leave 45 minutes early. Unless you checked over the exam 5 times, I don't see a reason to leave early. And with all that advice, that should effectively help to get the highest grade possible on any exams in the future. But as a disclaimer, of course, it's important to not stress out so much on the GPA that you have in college or in high school. In other words, your grades don't define you, and 1B, for example, isn't going to ruin your career or your future. Also, if you want more studying advice, be sure to check out my previous video on the basics of effective studying. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the bell, and I'll see you next time.